Hello and welcome to another BuildASoil YouTube episode. Today we've got Season 7, Episode 10. And it's been 7 days, 1 week since we transplanted. And before I even talk, just look. This is so different than even, I think, the last video. It's unbelievable how quick things are going. These Oyas have been hooked up. Look at how happy they are. Everything's just beaming. I'm really liking these double dose diesels. Right now in the bottom, we're at 58% moisture. It was at about 65. We had a little leak when I first started and I corrected it right away. Turns out one of the Oyas that I was reusing, I just had a little gap in here. So I got that all dialed. Everything's been holding perfectly and I'm very happy with the moisture. It's all been automatic since I set that up. Then we've got the EcoWit, and that's at 48%. That water is gonna automatically turn on as it gets lower, and we'll discuss the formulas in a later video. Then we've got this row right here that we're gonna set up on camera today. And so I'm gonna be setting it up with the BluMats. We'll go over that. Let's just keep going down the line. This one right here is gonna be the last to be fired up. We've got them in the auto pots, and then this is the full bed. One thing that I wanted to show you before we get into the BluMat, which we're gonna be installing today right here with the Blusoak tape. Look at the difference. So take a step back and see these plants right here. Even these are double dose diesels, and you can see that those ones are a little bit bigger. And so what's interesting is people might think, is it the soil? What's going on? Is it because they're by themselves? And one of the things that I've realized as a grower is that the roots go to the edges first. And I've explained this metaphor before. If you've ever seen cattle unloaded from a truck on a big property, they all go walk the fence line first, almost like, where are we gonna have food? What's going on? They have to know that, and then they can kind of relax. The plants send their roots in and they figure out their space. And in here, what you're seeing is, in my opinion, the representation that they've not run out of space yet. Their roots are going wild and they're commingling. They hit a wall here, the roots are extending, they're going down, there's moisture and food literally everywhere. And so these plants are putting more of their energy down low and sending roots and sending roots and sending roots and building this big battery of energy that we're gonna see come just hammer when it comes later. And to stretch, there's more hidden horsepower here, where if you look over here, it almost looks like these are growing faster. But from my personal experience, what happens is these ones have already said, you know what, I'm in a little container, and they start to push up vertically and they start to grow out a little bit more once they realize they've found the edges and there's not as much work to be putting those deep roots down. That's a little bit of hypothesis, so take it with a grain of salt. But anytime that I use bigger beds like that, I notice some initial differences in veg. And I've even had people in commercial facilities show me full beds all the way down next to pots and be like, why are the pots growing faster? Did you send me different soil? You can validate that through soil testing and determine, wow, something's going on with the bed. And that's not good or bad, it's just being aware of it. So I wanted to explain that to you. Otherwise, it's time to do BluMats today. We're gonna do a slightly deeper dive because to me, they're super simple, especially now that I've been using them. And I think most people that get good at using them, they come to this place where they're like, this is so simple. Why was I thinking this is so hard for so long? But when you're brand new, the BluMats can seem a little complicated. And so it may be that you just grab an EcoWit or you go with the Oyas because they're so simple. But if you like to tinker and you really like the individual plant control that a BluMat can provide, I'm hoping that today's video is going to teach you what the pressure that the BluMat is reading, how that correlates in your mind to how your plants access water. And I think when we're done, you're gonna have a really thorough understanding of the BluMat. And then once we've gone over that, I'm gonna set up the Blusoak system here, show you exactly how it will be installed and how you can configure it any way you'd like. Our kit that's available online, we sell a certain way, but if you're an advanced user, you can go right to Sustainable Village and you can place a sophisticated order to your exact needs, where most customers need a pretty basic setup. And so that's why we have the kits available at BuildASoil.com. I just wanted you to know that in case you're looking for something complicated, it's all possible. It's just like Legos. You can literally build it any way once you understand it. So let's get started. Take a sip of coffee here. I've got some instructions on the digital moisture meter, which we're gonna get set up. I've got the BluMat carrots right here in this bucket of water and they're pre-soaking. So if you're watching this video and you're gonna set them up, the first instruction is you need to pre-soak these for about 10 to 15 minutes. And the main reason is that allows these ceramic tips that are on here to get fully moistened so they're not dry. and that'll make sure that everything functions how it's supposed to. And we're gonna go over exactly how to set them up. Today we're gonna be using pre-dialed caps. And so we are updating the website, but at BuildASoil, every kit you get, every carrot you get, they're all gonna be pre-dialed with these marks on there. And we're gonna go over that together today, because that's the only way to get them at BuildASoil. You can get them non-marked, and it's just a little bit less money. And so if you're an advanced user, this is a non-marked one. You can see my Sharpie mark where I marked this personally. I'll go over loosely the method for dialing these in without the pre-mark, so you understand it. There's a cap dialing method that I'll at least discuss, and you can go watch the video if that's the method if you already have these. But the pre-marked sensor works really, really well. And for those of you that are brand new to BluMat, the pre-marked sensor is a way to get it from the factory where it's set to be within the range of what our plants need, because these can go bone dry or 100% wet, everything in between, and they can be highly customized. So the preset just makes it like, I don't have to know these. I just know that if I use this mark, it's for pressure, this mark's for gravity, and I can adjust a little in between. And then what I have is a moisture meter that will tell us exactly how wet it is. And I think when we're done explaining it today, you'll kind of get that a little better, and then you'll understand it. So I think what we should do is probably set this row up and discuss some of how it works. And then we'll go over to the 4x4 bed, because once I show you how the drip ring is set up, then you'll know that the drip tape and this setup I'll show you how to build is basically just a big drip ring. And so then all you'll know is that these BluMats just have an on-off according to the soil moisture, and then you feed the water to any sort of system. In fact, when I first started using BluMats, I didn't have drip tape, I didn't have anything. I would just go right out of here and the drop of water would fall into the soil. And then some people would connect a ring to other drippers. You can do that. You can literally get drippers from like Ace Hardware and plug them in, and then once this opens, it'll drip around your pot. But we've all come up with better methods. These drip rings, they're phenomenal. The Blusoak tape, phenomenal. So it's as basic as literally just letting this drip into your pot, and it's as advanced as having a sophisticated system with a pressure system like we're using. They also work with gravity, so every method. Most of you will use gravity, and the gravity uses a loop, so I'll loosely explain that, but I just want to get started right here on this setup. So that's what we're going to do right now, and we're just going to do it. I've got a bucket of soil here, and the reason I have the bucket of soil is I'm going to explain the squeeze test and access to moisture and show you how that translates to the BluMat. Then I've got these so that all I need to do is install one per each container, and that'll allow me to have individual moisture control on each drip ring. And so I'll go over that right now. Let's just get down here and do it. I'm gonna grab my scissors. I've got the digital moisture meter, which we're gonna attach, and we'll get some readings on. And so I'll explain how that works. Scissors and tape measure. And then this is an Allen key, you'll notice, that come with our preset sensors. And the reason why is they used to come like this, and you could buy a clear cap on there. So once you set it, you wouldn't accidentally bump it in the garden. Well, the new ones, they come with the preset mark, and they come with the cap so that you don't bump it. And then you can actually put this Allen key in there, and you can adjust the preset mark based on this green fin where it should be lining up. And you can do it without having to take the cap off. So the new ones come with like a green Allen key just like this. I just wanted to show you that. But, so what do? We've got a whole bunch of stuff over here. Essentially what I'm gonna do is connect this tube. This is the Superflex tubing. And I just cut a length. It doesn't have to be specific, so it goes to my last plant. That's really all it needs to do, because I want to have this whole row irrigated. And so essentially what I need to do is splice in each one of these carrots that's going to go in here. And you can see that it has this little brown tubing. And so essentially it's going to go like this, and the bottom's going to go in the soil. I'll show you in a minute. But this tube needs to connect to this red tube, and then it'll tap into the water line. Each one of them comes with this connector that goes, the big one goes in the red tube, and the little one, the 3mm, goes in the brown tube. And so for the very end of the row, I've got an elbow. And so you can see the Superflex with a little bit of moisture. Probably should have got that end wet. It goes on really, really easy. In fact, let me just do that. A little bit of moisture, and they go on super fast. And so then all I need to do is kind of eyeball. It doesn't really matter, but I want to eyeball like the next splicing zone. So if I go right here, that's all I really need. So splice it in about here. And so now I've got a T instead of the elbow, because the elbow's for the end. And so I'm gonna cut that in right here. Doesn't need to be perfect. I make a square cut, get a little bit of moisture on there so I'm not forcing it, and it slides on really easy with a little moisture. Okay, and then now I need to do one more, and I'll do that about here. There we go. A little bit of moisture. Now we're basically good to go, and I can connect all of my carrots and drip lines, but I'd like to put the actual sensors in there first, make sure that they're positioned properly, show you how to water them, and then we'll connect the brown tubing to this last. So before I do that, this is gonna go here, and then this has to tap into the main water line. And so that's gonna go, this is under 10 PSI of pressure right now, which means I can't just cut into it, but I do have to tee it in right here. And I'm gonna leave a little slack so I can move things around and it's not super tight in case I need to. So I'm gonna go right here to this shutoff, which I've got built in, and I'm just gonna do a 1/4 turn shutoff. Now there's no pressure, which means I can splice into here and I'll only lose a little bit of water. And so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Boom. Done. Now obviously it's gonna take up some of that line there, and when I open the pressure, it would just be squirting out of here if I open the pressure up. So I'll leave that. And now we have this teed in. That's how long it takes. It's super, super simple. I could provide like a shutoff valve. That would go to each one of these, but realistically, each carrot can just be shut off. On each drip ring, it's like its own on-off switch for each one of those carrots. So this one I'm actually gonna use for these auto pots as a shutoff valve, and I'll do that later. So I'll leave this right here. So now what we actually need to do is install the drip ring, and that has to go through the BluMat. So what I'll do now is show you how to set this up. We're gonna install them in the container and show you like good positioning where you should put it, because you don't want it to be like too close to the side. And then we're gonna connect them to the drip ring, and then we're gonna fire up the system and see if it holds. So I'm gonna show you what the pre-dialed cap looks like and how it works. And then we're gonna install the first one, and the rest will be easy. In fact, I think I'm gonna slow down and explain the pre-dialed cap, the tension, the whole deal. Right now I've got you on camera. Then we're gonna install it here. And I've got a printout from our website. They've got some instructions, some more info, but this will be super easy for me to explain. We've got some numbers on here, and I don't want you to zoom in and like be too particularly focused on it, but I at least want to show you on the camera. And so on here they have some pressure ranges, and they're preset so that without much measurement and this chart, you can dial it wherever you want. And so what one must know when they start using BluMat is that 0 is the wettest you can possibly be. 0 means 0 pressure to get water. So on the low end of the tension reading, we have 0, and in the high end in orange here, you have 125. 125 is about the driest you're gonna wanna get in your living soil. A lot of times growers will target 100. Many other growers, like myself in living soil, will like to have the wetter time, like it's never gonna be the same amount of water in here. And so what I mean by that is there's gonna be a curve of a high and low. When you drip from the top, it takes a while for the drip to get to the bottom. By the time it gets to the bottom, it's wetter than anticipated. So you create a curve, which is that's how nature works in these curves. And so the autopot is like a flat line. It's always wet, always the same. Where we're going to play with curves on that using the EcoWit. But the beautiful thing about the BluMat is as it drinks, it gets a little bit drier, and then water kicks on and it gets wetter. And then it gets wet, 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 and then it drinks and it gets drier, 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 and it creates this curve. Well, the curve has a high and a low. And so this is a 0 and a 50. Well, that's too wet. That would basically be flooding water everywhere if we got to 0. 50 is about the lowest. Some people go to 40. 40, 50 is about the lowest you'll want to be. Below the 40 mark, it becomes too close to 0 where the water is just falling out of the soil, just like a bucket of water. And so before I go too far the other way, I want to explain this test with you so you know what I mean. And then I'm going to tell you right away, we're going to be going 7 to 10 PSI. We're on a 10 PSI line. The top one is 1.5 to 2 PSI. That's for gravity in a bucket of water. And with gravity, you would take this tube I made and you would make a loop all the way around. You'd connect everything in, and at the very end, you would open it to let the air out. Since we're on pressure, I'm gonna be able to just purge the air out, no problem, and it's gonna blast right through. But when it comes to the 7 to 10 PSI, there's another one, 13 to 15. You might want a little more pressure if you have a large facility and you have a pressure reducer and you're doing a lot. So the reason why we didn't do that is the Blusoak tape, I believe the Blusoak max is 10 PSI. where the drip rings can go significantly higher. So we're gonna use 10 PSI. That's what we're set to on our water line right now. And so when I go to 10 PSI and I go over to the red and the blue mark that are coming on this cap, I can see that if I wanna be 100 is the driest and 50 is the wettest, that's the green, okay? That's ideal. We can always go a little bit wetter or a little drier based on the actual grow room, but I'm gonna target this 150 as a nice starting point. And so you can see that's dead between the red and the blue. So when I set my cap on, I'm gonna dial it halfway between the two marks. That's how I'm gonna set everything up. Once I get that going, I can use the actual moisture meter reading, the digital one, and see, is the preset cap following this exact curve, or do I need a little adjustment? And so it'll digitally display a number. And if this is right, the wettest this should get is it should say 50 on it, and then it should start to dry down a little bit. It's really, really cool. And it's super simple, but I had to explain some of the detail to get started. Now when you see me do it, and you've heard this, I think it'll click and make sense. So let me show you what I mean by tension. So right here, we've got the squeeze test for the BuildASoil container setup guide. And what I do is say, take your living soil and get it nice and moist and even so it's not dry. And what I want you to do is squeeze it. So you do a squeeze test and it should clump like this and not completely fall apart. And that means that it's like the right texture. Now here's the next thing you can do is if you squeeze it really hard, you'll notice, just see that drop of water? That one drop, when I'm squeezing hard as I can, that's ideal moisture in my opinion. That's perfection, okay? And I had to put a pretty good amount of pressure. I was probably putting, I don't know, squeeze test pressure. I don't like have something I squeeze that tell me the pounds per square inch, but there was a certain PSI my body had to exert to get that one drop of water out, okay? Now, if I were to add a lot more water in here, I would barely squeeze and it would just gush water. That means less pressure would need to be used to get access to water. If this was bone dry, I couldn't even get it to clump, and I could squeeze as hard as I want. I wouldn't get one drop of water out. That's what your plants are growing through. So when you have soil that's too dry, the plant is exerting massive amounts of pressure, this tension that the water has to get it to come across. But when it's in a swimming pool, there's, yeah, sure, unbelievably easy access to water with no pressure, but there's no oxygen in there. It's just saturated. So we need to have that ideal zone. That's where BluMat really shines, because it's basically, instead of us like trying to reinvent the wheel, it's like you can watch the plants in ideal circumstances and see what they do. And this whole system has been built off of that. So I'm gonna grab one of these, and they've been soaking for 15 minutes, and I've got a pre-set cap on here, okay? I'm gonna pull this back out a little bit since it's not completely shut down. And then I'm gonna make sure it's full. And this, I'm gonna put under the water. And if you look down here, I'm gonna use my thumb and I'm gonna kind of, under the water, I'm just making sure there's no air bubbles in there. Okay, so that it's all nice and full. And then underwater, I'm gonna go ahead and put this cap on with no air bubbles in there so that it's all completely water sealed. So I'm trying to do it in the back corner here, but it's kind of hard. So basically I'm just threading this on. And now that it's tight, I'm good to go. So this is set up and ready for install. My Allen key, and there's a green mark that's right here. Okay, this green fin is where I'm lining up with either the blue, right there, or the red, right there. I told you I'm gonna go halfway between, so I'm gonna go right there, halfway in between. That's the exact setting that I need, so that this is now pinched, which means it shut the water off. Now here's what's so cool, is in this cap, there's like a vacuum, there's holes in there. And so what's happening is this water that's in here is full. And if I were to unscrew the cap, it just shuts it off. It goes to zero pressure. Right now it's so full, it's at zero pressure. And so when I insert this into the soil like we're gonna do, the soil is gonna start to dry this out unless the soil is completely saturated. Well, the plant's gonna grow. Eventually the soil is gonna dry down. That means this is gonna start to dry out, and small amounts of water in this sealed tube are gonna leak out. Well, there's no air in here. There's no way for air to get in, which means that for this to go down and have water go out, it's gonna put an incredible amount of pressure on this cap because there's no way for air to get in. It's vacuum tube. So as the water goes down, it goes, and it puts incredible pressure in here and then opens the valve and it drips water. The valve is set on this mark to have that much pressure. And since they've already been preset, it's the amount of pressure that's perfect for living soil. So now you can tell that when this dries down, it pulls water out. That pulls on the vacuum, opens your switch. When it gets wet, the water goes back in, closes the switch, and it doesn't move very far. The vacuum pressure is very sensitive. That's why you have to fill them underwater and pre-soak them. It's everything. Once that's dialed, all it does is open this, and this goes into my drip ring. Instead of dropping drips of water, it goes into the drip ring and it evenly drips all the way around my container. Now the last part is, I don't want to put it right here on the edge. This has to be perfectly packed with soil. If there's an air gap here, it can dry out even though your soil's not dry. So we want the soil packed on there. You can move these around, right? Like when you're using the digital moisture meter. If you want to reset this, some people want to pull it up a little taller. Like I could put this in that far and get a top reading. So that's why we only sell the 9-inch. Some people like get the 3-inch. Well, you can measure the top just by burying it that far. If I want a deeper reading, I can bury it deeper. As deep as you bury, that's where the moisture curve is going to start. If you notice, the deeper it is, the longer it takes for the drops of water to get all the way down here. So you have a slightly bigger moisture curve. If I have it up here, the bottom will probably always be wet because it's going to start watering before the bottom's dry. So I like to go deep. It works really well for living soil, and you can tell it's not going quite to the bottom. So it'll be a little bit moisture underneath here. And then, so that's part of understanding the system. But this is dialed in how I want it. Instead of me putting it on the side or the center, I'm gonna put it kind of halfway in between, right about where the drip ring is. And so I'll probably install it right here. And then this tube just needs to go to the drip ring. So let's just go ahead and do this. Put it in here right now. Okay, that's it. Okay, now all I have to do is take this ring and see on this tube there's a barb there. I'm gonna go ahead and install that. With a little bit of moisture, those go on really easy. If it's dry, it's kind of a pain. Okay, so now that's all installed. Everything's how I want it. And then this, I've already preset right here on the water tube. As you can see, 3mm goes on really pretty easy. And now it's connected. So this BluMat is installed and ready. I'm actually live to the water line. The only reason I can't open the water line right now is I have 2 open holes still. Those need to go to 2 more carats. Then I can open and check the system, and I'm at 49% moisture. And what we're gonna do eventually is compare with the moisture meter. Hey, 49% buried in the bottom near where the BluMat carat is. Well, how does that read in pressure? And so really quickly, the vacuum pressure reading, it's different than this percentage. This is just a percentage of moisture. This is saying you could fit about double that water in there before you got to a 0 reading on the tension. So this is 0 to 100%, where the pressure reads pressure. And we correlate those numbers to this just so we can communicate. But really, it doesn't matter as long as you know the millibar reading on the BluMat that you're supposed to be at. I just share this so people know, hey, if I don't have a BluMat, how do I compare? Like, what's 49%? Growers like to see what each other are doing, so this allows us to communicate. All right, well, let's hook up the next ones. I don't have to talk so much now. So I'm gonna take this pre-dialed cap, got it in here. I'm gonna put the lid on one more. Okay, I've got it just hand tight. I'm not cranking it anything too crazy. That one's set now. Last thing I need to do is find my green mark. I need to go halfway between the red and the blue so they're all set up exactly the same. Go to the next one. Install it in the same spot. Okay, perfect. I got one more to do. No air bubbles, looks good. Don't want to bump any of these with my foot. Slip my shoe off. I'm just connecting the brown tube to the drip ring like I did on the other ones. Remember, this last one has an elbow, and so I just install that. That goes on perfect. That's it. BluMats are now installed. Now the last part, if I were doing this now, I'm gonna have to decide together. I have 2 of these, which I'm gonna be using on the digital meter, but it takes like, I can get a pretty quick reading, but you're supposed to let it sit for 15 to 20 minutes to give you the reading. So if I install this one, we could see what the actual number is on the soil. And that would tell me like how long it's gonna take for my BluMat to fire. But I'm probably gonna put this one in the bed and leave it there. And I'll get the other one and I'll like move it around. So I'm not too worried about it. We'll be going over this the whole time and getting some readings, and I will set it up on the bed when we're done. So you'll get a number out of here, but I just wanted to show you. So that's gonna go there. Normally I would install that and just make sure. Instead, let's just do this. I'm going to open it. Okay, 10 PSI pressure, just went and hit all those BluMat carats. I got no leaks. The Superflex works pretty dang good. And I'm gonna see if any of these were drier than the others right now. So let's see. No water. No water. no water. So that means that everything's perfect. I had it the ideal moisture, which means we didn't quite need it yet. We'll be monitoring this and the BluMat meters. It's gonna have to get a little bit drier. That will eventually activate the water, and these are automatic now. I don't have to do anything to water them. If you wanna follow the supplemental BuildASoil feed schedule, there's plenty of room to just top water. So hear me out. This BluMat's not gonna turn on until it gets dry. Well, there's a curve. And so if I want to, I can water at any time on the top. Or I can wait till it's getting closer to being dry and then water. And then it'll just prevent this from firing until it dries out again in the future. So literally, if I ever want to top water anything, I can do it. And then it'll just take that much longer for the BluMat to turn on. It's not a big deal. I don't have to put product through the BluMat. I can just put it in my Chapin, top water, foliar spray, do whatever I want. And then if I accidentally added like too much BuildABloom with like a gallon of water and now it's overwatered, well, this won't water until it gets dry again. So it's all automated, which makes it super, super simple. So that's it. We will be setting this up on another video. Basically, these are happy. I've got the moisture readings. This one's at 61% on the bottom, which means it's still plenty moist in here right now. I don't need to start bottom watering, so that'll be in the next episode. We're hoping to flip to flower. It's only been 7 days. It's insane how quickly they grow, and the health is just unbelievable down here. We want to flip to flower like today, but we're not going to, so by the end of the week. So it'll be 10, 11 days when we flip to flower. I've just got a few more things to record. I want to make sure that all the BluMats are working, the soak tape, everything's dialed. We're going to discuss like what to do with all this cover crop. We're going to go over the supplemental feed schedule. We'll talk about the transition to flower. And so at home, you can just kind of flip the lights, but here I want to make sure I document everything. So we're going to buy ourselves a few more days of time in here, which I think we have. I did leave a foot off the wall behind the tent so I can come in these back doors if I really need to, and I think that'll be helpful. We've got to put trellis net up, but so far, BluMats are now installed. They're on the pressure system. That's a big chunk of what I wanted to do today. Lastly, I want to install the Blusoak tape. And we already went over the squeeze test, so you can kind of get, okay, the EcoWit, they measure the percentage of water, right? So 100% would be in a glass of water. But the tensiometer, the BluMat, they measure pressure. So 0 is being in a glass of water. It takes 0 pressure to access the 100% water. So that's how these systems are a little different from each other. And so 50% on the meter is like half the pressure, like half the water, so to speak, that could be in there. If you're at 100%, there's no room for air. And so that would be like 0 on the tension meter. And so I just wanted you to understand that. Now that you know what it works like, it's pretty easy to see that it's just an on-off switch according to moisture. And so what I've done is I've gone ahead and pre-built this. Now I put 5 on mine. The normal 4x4 kit that we sell at BuildASoil comes with 4. And you can put 4 drip tapes across your bed. I could have used 4. They would have just been closer to the stock. I could put 4 anywhere I want. Really, all that matters is the bed is evenly moist with water. You could put, the whole thing could be drip taped. You could literally put 12 rows in if you wanted, because the BluMat is just gonna turn the water off when the soil is properly wet. The challenge with a big bed is if I drip the water over here, it may never get to that far side. And so to measure from one BluMat, I want to know that wherever that BluMat reading is coming from, it's watering the whole bed perfectly even, so that it's likely to be the same. And I can use moisture meters to get a reading if I ever think anything's off. I can put an EcoWit somewhere else. I can use the digital moisture meter to just put it in there and leave it for 20 minutes one day and say, oh, the back is a little wetter than the front. But when you set up a drip tape system, the whole bed is evenly watered. That's why they use drip tape on farms. And so today I want to show you, you could put a 12 rows, 5 rows, 4 rows. It's just like Legos. The only thing that matters is you have one of these connectors. That's where the BluMat tube's gonna go in. That one BluMat tube is gonna fill this whole thing with water, filling that entire bed with water until the meter that we had shuts off. It'll shut the water off and it stops the drip tape. So I would like to put mine, I'm gonna put my carrot right around here. That way I can put the moisture meter in this area and I can get readings without burying my head back there. So let's see, we're at 50% moisture here, which is similar to the other ones, so we should be ideal. And then I've got this tape, which comes in a roll. I've already pre-cut them. These are 40 inches. It's just, that's the width that works perfect in my bed. I like to lay them out and just take the exact measurement and then make your own, depending on the bed size that you have. And then these just open and they go on here. And these fill with water and they slowly leak the water because there's really small perforations in here. And so it's very consistent everywhere it goes. That's how drip tape works. And so let's set these up. And I think you watching me install this, it's gonna be easier than me explaining it. All I know is I want this one piece that I told you, the one connector to put the water in, I want it up here in the front left. And so these are 10 inches between connections here. That's just based on my spacing. When you get the product, you can do anything you want with it, order more parts, follow it exactly how we do it, do whatever you want. I can adjust this as we go. I've got the other side over here. The only difference, this one doesn't have the little connector. I'm only putting the water in one side and it'll fill it up completely with water. So that's it. Now I need to connect this tape at each spot and then connect this whole setup to the carrot. Let's first install these. We'll do it on camera together. I've got the drip tape right here. It's open, and when it's full of water, it'll be like a hose, it'll be full. I just use my pinky, a Sharpie works really well. But see this flap right here? I wanna make sure that I position this flap properly, and then I also wanna go over the threading. And so right here, all I have to do is I want this all the way open, basically, which is like loosen, and it brings this green cap up to the top, exposing this barb right here. That'll allow me to put this in here, and then when I thread this, it's gonna clamp down on it. Does that make sense? And so you can just see that I have to screw it tight like this, and it goes down. And so since it's going this way, I want this flap to go with. So it's nice and it doesn't like create a problem with that flap. So let me go all the way back up, and then you can see I'm gonna fold that, kind of puff it out like this, fold it, and I'm just gonna get that up there as far as I can. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want it to go all the way up to the green line there. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna follow this, and that's gonna clamp it down. And so this should be going down, clamping it. It feels backwards. So once you get that, and now you know it doesn't pull off, you're done. I just need to do that on every one of these fittings, and that will complete the entire setup. Now you can see the water's gonna go in here, go through the tube, go all the way through to the other side, and connect back in a circle with pressure all the way around being even. Once it's full, it'll exert that 10 PSI pressure, inflating these like a hose, and it'll slowly drip out. So nothing to do now except for to install this, and then we'll get to the next part where I actually finally hook this up to pressure. Okay, I don't wanna have that all twisted, so I wanna make sure that my drip tape's flat all the way across. See how the spacing is. I'm gonna chop and drop some of this cover crop. We'll be talking about that in the next episode, so that'll also be a little bit helpful. Okay, last one, make sure it's flat. And then I'll actually play with the Allen key and show you how it fills with water. Maybe we'll do that. Yeah, we'll do that right now. Just fill it with water, it'd be kind of fun. In our greenhouse, when we use the drip tape, sometimes it'll like actually pull. And it's possible that I might want to shorten these just slightly, but I think this is gonna work pretty well. It doesn't have to be perfect. The last thing I wanna do is I'm gonna move this. I'm gonna probably put this on a bamboo pole or something, but I don't want it to get wet. Although it's, you know, got some moisture proofing, I'm just trying to make sure that this is all hooked up right. And I'm just gonna hang this for now until I figure out what I'm gonna do. Next step, get my pre-marked sensor here. Okay, and this is what's gonna be powering that entire 4x4 bed. I've got my green tube. I'm gonna put this underneath here, cap it so that it's got all the water in there, which means it's got a full vacuum tube. Any movement in the water will cause pressure on the vacuum tube now. And so since this is nice and soaked and the soil's wet, it shouldn't fire, but we're gonna open up the cap until it fires. So let's put this, let's see, I need to connect it down, and I need to connect it to there. You can always get a longer piece of tubing. But I think right in between these two plants, here's the main consideration. See these two drip lines? I don't wanna be right on a drip line. It's gonna shut off too early. I wanna be equidistant between my two drip lines so that water from both sides hits the sensor and I'm getting an accurate reading. So I'm gonna go right in the middle of these two plants right here. My other meter's not there, so that's perfect. I'm gonna go right here in the middle of these two plants. There we go. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drag this tube all the way over, and this is gonna connect right into that little one I told you about. There, now it's hooked up. Now the last part, this is the last part that I need. I just need to cut in here. The problem is that the water's on right here, so I can't do that. And so I'm gonna grab my scissors and show you what I'm gonna do. Got the Allen key to play with that in a minute. I actually put another shut off because I knew I'd need it just for the 4x4 bed in case. So I'm gonna shut that off. Now there's no pressure. The reservoir is out there, so now this whole line is dead basically, and I can splice in, and I wanna make it as close as possible. Now here's the thing. I'm probably gonna go get a longer piece of tubing here, because otherwise I'm gonna have to go like this, okay? So I'm gonna go get that and do this all right on camera and show you exactly how I do it. So just give me a minute and we'll get that all done. What I went ahead and did was I ran and just grabbed some longer tubing of this. When you get your bed kit, you'll have a little bit longer one that comes with it. I just grabbed random ones, and so this one happened to be shorter, but it's all like Legos, I said, it doesn't matter. So all I did was I unscrewed this, 2 full rotations on the preset, pulled the tube out, slid the new one in, 2 rotations back down, and we're done. So the preset still stands. It's between the red and the blue, which you can use your Allen key for, or you can pull the plastic cover off like I did to put the new tube in. And so I'm gonna go back and set it and make sure it's between the red and the blue exactly. And so that's gonna be my initial setting. I'm gonna leave this in so we can play with it with the pressure on in just a second here. Now that the pressure's been off for a second, I need to splice in right here, and I've got my T. So it looks like right about there. Go ahead and cut that. That's just water from the other side. This Superflex is so cool. All right, it's done. That's it. So now I can go turn the pressure back on, and we'll see. I don't think any water is gonna go through because the soil is at a good moisture level, and the BluMat is already preset to be targeted not to water unless it needs it. But let's open it. Got a quarter turn that's now on. Pressure back through the entire system. I see no water coming through. And so now let's play with it. Since I know my preset marks, I'm gonna go ahead and open it counterclockwise, and it's pinching this tube right now. I'm gonna open it. I can hear water. I went way past that red mark. Past. I'm gonna open one full rotation, which you would never normally do. This is back between the red and the blue on the pre-marked, but open. And so now what should be happening is slowly, all the water is going through here. It's slowly going all the way around. And normally what'll happen is these won't be so dry. They'll be kind of half full with water until your system fires. But for the first time, look at this. See how it's moving? Watch. It's getting heavier. It's gonna lay itself down now. So it's just slowly filling with water. The whole thing, 10 PSI pressure. In fact, while that's here, let's just go out here real quick. We've already shown you this in earlier episodes. You can see it's just below 10 PSI, which means this is gonna kick on pretty soon when it gets to the low end, and it'll boost that pressure back to 10 and hold it. And this is the pressure reducer that's keeping it. Otherwise it'd be a lot higher pressure on there. So once it's fully stabilized, I can actually adjust the pressure in case I'm thinking that's a little low, but it'll take a little more volume to activate, and it's super silent. Let's go back in there. We'll see how long it takes, and then we'll set it back to the pre-marked setting on the carrot. Okay, see this now? See how it's like a tube? How cool is that? So now it's not all flat. It's literally full of water all the way around my bed. And now I can kind of stretch it to all the corners and make sure that it's sitting flat how I would want it. And I don't want it all the way to the edge so that it dribbles water down the side. I want it to go into the soil. And then see, it's on top of my mulch. I believe you can bury these no problem, but I don't want to get like algae buildup and stuff inside, and I want to be able to kind of visually see it. So I'm just going to leave this here. It'll get a little bit overgrown, but that's totally fine. We will be chopping and dropping cover crop, and I can always just put it right on top. It doesn't matter. The drip tape's pretty forgiving. Now, while I mention it, while we're waiting for this to get completely full, let's go discuss that over here. One thing that you notice with these drip rings is that we have them just sitting on top. What's cool is when they're sitting, you can actually watch it drip and know that it's working. The other thing is you don't want roots to grow in here. If roots grow in here, they can clog it. So we just leave these up top. We don't bury these. In season 6, I actually buried these and they worked. Had it been a longer grow, it probably would have gotten clogged, but Cooper from BluMat reaches out. He's all, hey bro, you do not want to bury those. So I'm learning right along with you. I've learned a lot about these and I'm a lot more comfortable with it, which is part of why I wanted to do this video where we explained the tension and how we're setting them up. But let's go back over to the drip tape because you can see it's starting to get full now. It has to be fully full before there's enough pressure for it to water. Right now it's dry. See that water right there for the first time? There's a little beating of water. That's finally getting close to enough pressure to start to drip evenly all the way down this tape. But everything has to be in like fully dialed. Now this is kinking because it's not stretched out until it gets settled in. So let's do that. I'll move some plants out of the way. Get that dialed. Oh, it looks really good now. So you can see my 5 lines. 4 is more than enough. You could probably get away with 3. If you really wanted to, you could do even more, but I think this is probably the max I would do in a 4x4. I'm just starting to see water beating up. Now here's what I'm looking for. The reason why I turned my pressure on, besides just because it's fun to show you, is what if this is your first time doing it and the drip tape has a leak and you leave town and it fires up your whole system and it's just shooting water out. What's good is we can see pressure, which means that each one of these fittings is held tight, and I did it properly where I fit the drip tape on there. And now I'm actually seeing it beat up. It actually happens underneath with gravity. You're seeing a little bit force through the top, but most of it's underneath, and it's just gonna fall down. And so now we're at full pressure, and it's watering the bed. And if this is where I let it, I have it so open right now, because I wanted to show you the water. There would literally be water pouring out of here. It would flood that entire reservoir in here. It takes hours to do it, but the BluMat controls it all. So the preset sensors are really, really cool. It really helps with that. Here's what I'm looking at. Everything looks good. I've got pressure throughout. It's starting to drip, but I'm gonna dial back. There's a red mark here and a blue mark, and this little green fin is the indicator where I'm lining things up with. And so I'm gonna tighten it, pinching this tube. 1 full rotation, because they come in the right range preset. There's the red mark. So if I was on gravity, 1.5 to 2 PSI pressure, that's where I would set it, right on the red mark there. But since I'm on 10 PSI, I'm gonna go to the middle. If I was on a hose or on higher pressure 15, I'd go to the blue. I'm gonna go halfway in the middle. Now here's what I can do. If I'm like, it's a little too wet, I want it slightly drier all the time. I can dry it. And what that does is it takes my driest point with the least amount of moisture, and it takes my wettest point with the most, and it bumps it. So you still have a curve, it's just that it'll get slightly drier and not quite as wet. Or you can bump it where it stays super wet and never gets quite so dry. It's a curve. You can just move the highs and the lows by the depth of the carrot and the setting on the actual carrot. And so since this is going 9 inches deep, it's gonna give me a really good reading on there. And I know it'll be slightly moisture deeper below that. And so I'm setting it in the middle. That should set us at a curve of 50 to 100. The last thing that I wanna do to get some indication of that on camera is to do the digital moisture meter. So let's do that right now. I'm gonna grab this. You can use any tube, it doesn't matter. It comes with a clear tube, so I'm gonna use that, but you can use green. And here's the thing, you don't wanna put this underwater to put the cap on. And so all I wanna do is make sure it's full. This doesn't have to be perfect like the carrots. You actually want to hold this button for a few seconds until you see the zeros. See, I see 0, 0, 0 by holding it. That's what I want. Then I put this on. Now it's fully reset, and it can't be reset on the vacuum tube. It has to be reset in the open air where there's 0 pressure. And so now, if I were to put this in this water, this should read 0 and it should stay 0. So let me click it. 0. Bucket of water, 0 pressure to get water. I'm gonna put this in a similar location. Wait 20 to 45 minutes to get an accurate reading. These are just the instructions from the BluMat website. So I'm gonna put this one right here. Now, it's obviously not right where that is, and I know ideally they want them to be pretty close together, but I'm gonna put them close to the front here, same type thing, and just push, so. There we go, similar depth. Maybe, like, you don't want it to be so deep that it's like getting constantly wet. They have a cap that comes with here that I'll put on here to protect it from the water, but that's about what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna leave it right there. I'm gonna push it now and see. It says 33, 34, so watch. This is what happens if you want to see on camera. See how it's climbing? It's because now it's starting to dry that ceramic tip out just a little bit. That's why it takes 20 minutes. And so now this reading's gonna adjust and adjust and adjust until it settles in. And you don't want to rely on the reading until you've waited that full time. So we'll come back in a half hour or so. We'll see where the setting's at. We'll calibrate that to this percentage. We'll go over everything on camera at a future time. What I don't want to do is give you misinformation, so I'd rather let this all marinate for a little bit, then we'll come back and we'll get readings, we'll go over it all together. And so I think that's the best thing that I should do right now. Yep, we're about 53 and it slowed climbing. So I honestly think that's probably where we're gonna be at. It's probably in the 60 to 70 range, but I don't wanna guess. We'll go over the exact numbers together when it's time. Right now you can see that these are already declining slightly in pressure, but there's no air getting back into the system now, and so it's just gonna kind of hold, and that's what it'll look like. So the last thing I wanna do is hook up these auto pots, but I feel like too much in one episode. That'll take me like 5 minutes, 10 minutes to set up. So in the next episode, we wanna get to the flip to flower. So what I need to do is go over the environmental protocol, the actual flip to flower. Like, we're about to launch a rocket here. and I want to go over the pre-launch checklist and make sure that you're comfortable and familiar with everything that's going to take to actually turn the timer to 12:12 and be ready for these plants to go to flower. One of the things I did not do very well last time was do the trellising, and so this time we're going to install trellis very early. Now with these beds, you can actually build PVC trellis systems in, but since we're maxing out the tent, I'm going to go right from this pole, which by the way, Westlow, thanks so much for dropping this off. I thought it was really cool. He's so like on it. He even said living soil seeds already. I was like, it's pretty cool. But what we're gonna do is use these poles and attach trellis netting and just make this entire back half trellis. We're probably gonna build 2 layers in before we even really get going. And then we're gonna flip to flower in it. And then you're gonna watch, once we're done, all the irrigation, all the BluMat talk, everything's on and activated. I basically just get to watch it grow. And the only thing I'm gonna be responsible for really is making sure that I kind of bend the tallest ones and keep the canopy somewhat even. As you can see, some are already shorter, some are taller. And when we're not growing all the same clone, it can be a lot harder to manage canopy, but it's fun. So that's all we'll really have to do. Next episode's coming down the pipe. We'll be turning on the auto pots, and then after that, getting the trellising in, and the whole time talking about supplemental feeding and environment, making sure that we got the pre-launch checklist ready so that by the end of this week, I can actually go into the NIWA and tell it, hey, 12 hours of light, no more 18 hours. And we'll talk about the step down in light, we'll talk about the temperature, humidity, all of it, but like, it's happening really quickly. So I hope you can see through the camera how fast it's going. It's been really fun. But that wraps up today's episode. Like usual, if you haven't done so already, please go hit the subscribe button, like this content, share it, email your friends, blast it on social media. We put a lot of effort into this, and the more people that learn these methods, instead of, like when I first started, you get a lot of misinformation, especially if you want to grow organic, and you end up just chasing your tail. And I want people to have out the gate success on their first grow so that they can justify the expense and time that it takes, and they can be happy sharing top shelf herb with their friends and have their friends be like, bro, how did you do this? This is the best I've ever had. You grew this? And you're like, yeah, it's just a party favor. Like, to me, that's the best. Instead of bringing a bottle of wine to your friend's house for the dinner, bring them a fat jar. If they're into that, it's gonna be like, they'll never forget that. And you can do all of it following the BuildASoil way, having a blast, knowing every detail that goes into it, the ingredients, you know, if there's mold or not. Like when you learn to grow these plants, you realize how bad people can grow flower and how bad it could be for you when you're smoking it on the daily. So in any case, that's it. That's been the episode. Thank you so much. Until next time, I will see you on the next BuildASoil video.